Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. What happens when engineering students are asked to truck-proof a mailbox? Yes, I know there are a lot of mailbox stories on here, but I just learned this story from my dad involving my Uncle Dale, family friend who passed away a few months ago, and figured you guys would get a kick out of it. Years ago, back when Uncle Dale and Dad were university students, their engineering professor came to their class with a problem that needed solving. His mailbox was getting broken by someone driving by every night. He and his wife had put up something like 4 or 5 mailboxes, and all 4 or 5 times, the mailbox had been knocked over by someone driving a red truck. This professor offered extra credit to any group of students who could come up with a truck-proof mailbox that not only fit with city regulations but within a budget of $20. Which back then was a good-sized chunk of change. Well, if anyone here knows anything about engineers, as Dad puts it, they love solving problems. And if it's engineering students, they'll make it an experience to remember. Dad and Uncle Dale got together and got to work. They found a steel bar that fit within mailbox regulations. Posts have to be a specific height, width, and depth, and filled the inside with a mixture of concrete and steel rebars. Once the concrete had cured, they welded 8 rebars to the sides of the bar, bent them in half and stuck it inside a bucket. To add extra weight, they filled the bucket with the heaviest rocks they could find. As a finishing touch, they painted it brown and black, to look like wood, and put the ugliest mailbox we could find on sale on top, welding it down for good measure. They brought this monstrosity into class, more dragged it because it was so heavy, and told the professor to bury the bucket where the mailbox stood. Since they were the first to turn in their project, the professor agreed to give it a try. That night, the professor and his wife were awoken by a metallic bang, followed by a lot of cursing. They went outside and wouldn't you know it, there was that red truck speeding away, the mailbox still standing. At the base was a broken wooden baseball bat. 2 days later, the professor gets a bill in the mail for a hospital visit. Turns out when the passenger hit the mailbox, he did some serious damage to his arm and shoulder. They were planning on suing the professor, but the professor hired a lawyer who basically told the plaintiffs, "You're just going to admit that you were vandalizing the mailbox multiple times." That shut them up. To the best of my dad's knowledge, the mailbox is still standing. The other students who still brought in mailboxes had theirs gifted to different professors throughout the town and are also still standing. Story 2. Homophobic parents made my life hell for 2 months, so I gave them a taste of their own medicine. Background. So back when I was 15, I had a father who we'll call Deadbeat Joe. Deadbeat Joe was the stereotypical deadbeat father, as he almost never contacted me of his own volition, and he resisted paying my mother child support whenever he could because he hated her as she left him and took his baby away from him, so he took it out on me, his words not mine. My mother, being the saint she was, never talked bad about him and tried to endorse a relationship between us throughout my entire childhood. I did love Deadbeat Joe and would often want to spend time with him, but to no avail because he was always busy getting his dick wet with some rather questionable women, so I was basically forgotten about by him until the few occasions when he realized he remembered that he did have an older son. Because of that, I was raised by my mother and my stepfather, who I call Dad. They really loved, and still do love me, and they worked their asses off to make sure that I was well cared and provided for. Unfortunately, me and my family had to move away to another state when I was 12, which meant that my parents ended up buying a house which we moved into. Now, something to mention, up to this point we were very poor and my parents ended up buying a house after getting a great deal for it. However, the house was and is very poor quality and my parents didn't know that, so we ended up basically getting scammed. My mother lost her job and over time we ended up becoming so poor that we ended up having to rely on food banks to supply us with the food necessary to survive. Luckily, or rather unluckily, Deadbeat Joe and his new wife, who we'll call Chris, said that they'd take me in and that they had a good, decent quality of life which my parents bought, because to my mother Deadbeat Joe didn't really seem like the type of guy who would lie about something that big, so despite my objections, I hated Deadbeat Joe by this point. I went to go live with Deadbeat Joe and Chris plus their kids due to the fact that my real parents were about to lose our home at the time. And they didn't want me to be homeless along with them. At first they were very welcoming, but after a few weeks things started to change. Both Chris and Deadbeat Joe had lied and they were just as poor as my parents were. Over time, Chris had started to show the volatile side of herself and Deadbeat Joe found out I was gay, which was a problem due to the fact that he was very Christian. They both really hated how I was LGBT despite claiming otherwise, as Deadbeat Joe felt that I needed mental help because he felt that being gay was an illness. They tried to force me to conform to their beliefs that being gay was wrong, but I refused, which made them very angry. Chris also ended up just being horrible and manipulative to me on a regular basis, as she would do things like set up a schedule for the time of when us kids could do certain things, refused to let me go to school for no good reason, threatened to isolate me from her entire family if I didn't do what she wanted me to, etc. Due to all of this, it caused me a lot of stress and anxiety over the 2 months I stayed there, and I would cry a lot in the corner of my room wishing that the fuses that kept breaking would set the house on fire and take me with it. It built up a lot of anger and resentment within me and all of the things that Chris and Deadbeat Joe would do and say to me. After a while, the hostility in the house built up and I would eventually be accused of being a pedophile who wanted to molest my brothers because Chris said that someone looked up child porn on her cell phone. Deadbeat Joe ended up taking away my phone and threatening me with knives, which culminated to me taking my phone back and running away to hide in the bushes outside of the trailer park we lived in. The cops came, my parents manipulated the situation to make it seem like I was a terrible child, and they left. The next week was a living hell afterwards, as Chris and Deadbeat Joe kept trying to get a confession out of me and kept threatening me, but I held my ground and was able to leave their house and move back in with my parents. By this point, I was seething with rage, but I didn't do anything to them as I wanted to move on. However, a month after I left her house, I remembered the smug face Chris made throughout the week she kept me a prisoner in her house and kept trying to ruin my life. I decided that I hated her too much to not retaliate against her and her husband. So that's what I ended up doing. The revenge. I decided that I would sign Chris up for all the spam/junk mail I could find using the information I could find online and on the school directory of the school she worked at. Looking to hear the sacred word of Scientology? Click. Want to hear about our shitty products that will fall apart after one use? Click. Want to see some hot sexy women get it on with each other? Click, click, click. Next, I decided to send Chris' family some recordings I took of some of the things that she would say to me. During my stay at Chris's house, I had recorded the things that she was saying to me, so I had evidence to show my parents that she was abusing me. I ended up sending those recordings to all of her close friends and family before blocking them. They were very bad, so it wouldn't have surprised me if some of them ended up distancing themselves from her after listening to it. Lastly, I decided that I would continue to make Deadbeat Joe pay my mother for what he owed her in child support. I was originally going to ask my real dad to adopt me, but after learning of how much money Deadbeat Joe had to send my mother, around $1,200 per month, I did the math and concluded out of spite that I would let my mother keep on milking him for what he was worth until I turned 18. It's going to be quite a bit of time before I become an adult too, as currently I am 16, so by the time I have turned 18 DJ will have to legally pay my mother $25,000 over the next few years of my life, which is definitely not something to sniff at. Resolution. I never heard back from my evil parents after I carried out my revenge against them, so I don't really know how their immediate reaction towards what I'd done. However, after going back to the school directory to see if any changes were made to it, I discovered that almost all of the teachers' info was scrubbed from the site and my stepmother name was nowhere to be found. I connected the dots and it made me realize that I had caused an entire site-wide change, and the reason why I'd never heard back from my abusive parents was because of how badly I had humiliated Chris, and I knew that Chris would have flogged Deadbeat Joe if he dared try to talk to me again. After realizing this, I laughed so hard I almost pissed myself and I left the school's website. Currently, I am studying for an exam that will earn me certification in an aspect of designing which is important for the field I want to get into. I am taking my education seriously, and I now have opportunities that I wouldn't have been afforded had I stayed at Chris' house. I have made some new friends and have now moved on from the things that my parents did to me. Dr. Evil homophobic biodad and stepmother make my life a living hell for 2 months. I enact my revenge and now they have to pay my real parents 25k over the next 2 years of my life and have gotten outed as abusers to their family and friends. Story 3. Entitled Neighbor Complains About Our Noise Ends Up Losing $8,000. Sometime around 2002 my wife and I moved into an 1100 SQ Fort condominium with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. We were very fortunate to get this condominium as a second owner and we paid only $114,000, $6,000 more than the original price. Our condo was on the 3rd floor and all rooms were carpeted throughout the condo with only one small 4x4 square of linoleum inside the front door to the outside breezeway. This will become important later. And yes, even the bathrooms, kitchen, and dining room were carpeted. The front door opened to a large open space with vaulted ceilings with the great room to the left and the dining room and kitchen to the right. The kitchen area was separated from the great room with a wall that had a cutout over the kitchen sink and we had a long hallway directly going out of the great room to all the bedrooms and straight in front of the front door. We got to know some of the neighbors and got along well with most of them. The neighbors directly below us were a young couple that were attending university and were nice and cordial with us. Shortly after they graduated, they rented out their condo to her brother and his college friends. The brother was a decent guy and we mostly had no problems except for one of his birthdays where their music and boisterous conversations and happy birthdays, etc. kept us up until 4:30 a.m. in the morning. My wife and I returned the favor by blasting our music the very next morning at 8 a.m. But we talked a couple of weeks later and all had a laugh about it and never had any real problems after that. Between 2004 and 2006 we changed all the flooring in the kitchen and dining room to ceramic tile, including the area in front of the front door, to avoid having to pay for carpet cleaning in the dining or kitchen area due to spills or our young daughter throwing food on the floor from her high chair. In 2007 our cordial neighbors sold their condo to an older newlywed couple, late 20s to early 30s. Now if anyone has lived in between a first and a third floor condo or apartment you will know that it is the worst place to be if you expect silence. With kids or music you will always have some noise that filters through the floor or ceiling. I don't know what they were thinking or expecting when they moved in there. I was blissfully unaware that the condo had been sold until one day about a month later I brought home a powered subwoofer and hooked it up to my home theater sound system, around 6 p.m. I promptly put on an action flick with some big explosions and sat down to enjoy the new and improved immersive sound. After a little bit of gunfire and 2 explosions I hear the doorbell ding dong. I get up and immediately hear ding dong again. I walk the 5 feet to my front door and open it to see my entitled neighbor, I'll call her Karen, standing on my doorstep. Me, hi. Can I help you? Very agitated Karen. My husband and I are trying to enjoy a quiet and peaceful dinner. Can you please turn down whatever show you are watching? We can hear everything that's going on. Me, oh, sure. Sorry about that. She turned around and walked away. I closed the door, turned the subwoofer down a ways and the main volume down a bit and thought nothing of it. Shortly after the next round of gunfire and explosions I hear the ding-dong and then some rapid fire knocking at my door. I paused my movie and then I opened the door to see Karen again. Me, hi. What can I do for you? Karen, we can still hear everything from your show. You need to turn it down now. At this point I was a little fed up with her crap and decided to call her on it. Me, you say you can hear everything. Can you give me some of the last dialogue you heard? Karen, I don't know. I just know you are watching XXXX show. She was totally wrong. Me, no. I am actually watching YYYY movie and here are the last 3 lines of dialogue. And I gave her those lines. Me, it seems you can't hear my movie as well as you are claiming. Karen, with blazing eyes and red in the face, I don't care. It's too loud. You need to turn it down. Me, actually noise ordinance says I don't have to turn it down until 10 p.m. Karen, getting huffy, fine. I guess my husband and I will have to go out to eat to get some peace and quiet. Me, in my most cheerful voice and waving, have a good night. I then turned my subwoofer up a little and the main volume back up to its previous level and enjoyed the rest of my movie. The neighbors did end up going out that night for dinner or whatever. At our next HOA meeting, Karen stands up and complains long and loud about the noise. How she can hear kids jumping on the carpeted floor, we had a 4-year-old, and crying, we had a new baby, and hear us walking up and down our hallway and hear our music and movies and TV shows, and how the Hispanic neighbors on the first floor play their music on Saturday morning so loud they can't sleep in and argue so loud they can hear every word, etc. ad nauseum. This went on for 6 months. Every time she complained, the HOA told her if it's between the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., we can do nothing. If it's after 10 p.m. and before 8 a.m., you can call the police, and then the HOA would send out a letter by U.S. mail asking everyone to be cognizant of their neighbors and laying out the local city noise ordinance. I finally stopped attending the HOA meetings after month 3 of the same bull crap. She never failed to visit at least once or twice in the week after these notices, and twice she taped them to my door. I also learned during this time that they were members of our church and had actually been assigned to visit us each month. They never did. Cue the ProRevenge. Around the 6 to 7 month mark of her constant complaints and harassment, and even a couple of visits from some very apologetic police officers after 11 p.m. at night, they said they could hear nothing outside of my condo door, we decided to upgrade our flooring. We knew this would inflame our entitled neighbor, but we didn't care as we were tired of the constant stream of complaints from them. We chose to extend the entry tile all the way from the front door, down the long hallway to the master bedroom door, and we wanted to tile the bathrooms as well. We also went with a light coffee-colored bamboo hardwood in our great room. So, demolition first. We tore out the carpet and tack strips and pried the base molding trim off the walls. As I'm removing the last of the nails from the walls and subfloor, about noon on a Saturday, wouldn't you know it, bang, bang, bang. From the front door. Me, yes. Karen, can you keep it down? I'm trying to have a pampered chef party. Me, sure. I promptly finished pulling or driving in nails and then proceeded to bang my hammer all over the subflooring like I was driving loads of new nails for the next hour, and made sure to turn on my stereo to the local hard rock station and turn it up for the next 4 hours. FYI, the 1RST floor neighbors were already blaring some great mariachi music. They did this every Saturday and Sunday as they cleaned their condo from top to bottom. We then rented a hardwood floor nailer that, in addition to compressor noise and to loudly driving a nail into the flooring and subfloor, also had to be struck with a large dead blow hammer. Bang! 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 It took us 2 to 3 days to install the coffee-colored bamboo hardwood flooring in the great room, and we were sure it was driving Karen absolutely batty. We ended up installing an awesome tile inlay down the hall, had tile running from the front door to the master bedroom door along the great room side of the divider wall, tile in the dining room, kitchen, and both bathrooms. We got the base molding on, more nail gun and compressor fun, and caulked. The new floors looked amazing, and the bonus was, every time a hard shoe, like my daughter's favorite Sunday shoes she wore everywhere, every day, or high heel, my wife chose to learn how to do everything in 4 to 6 inch stilettos during this time, struck the floor. It was like the impact echoed through our perfect floors. All this was due to our neighbor complaining. It was also in preparation to sell our condo as we had grown out of it by this time. We sold it within 1 month of listing at $160,000. During closing, the real estate agent for the new owners told us that the floors absolutely sold this place. We also sold at the very top of the real estate boom right before the real estate market crashed. We later learned from some of our neighbors that within 9 months of our selling our condo, the second floor entitled neighbors moved out and sold their condo for $30,000 less than we had, and took about an $8,000 loss, and sent a letter of complaint to the Hoa stating their condo was unlivable because of the noise from our incredible floors. Winky face, that's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.